Today we are going to be looking at the Transfiguration, which is a change. And what did Peter, James, and John learn at Jesus Transfiguration? We're going to be looking at two different verses. We're going to start in Matthew chapter 17. And the first question we're going to look at is, what did Peter, James, and John see at Jesus Transfiguration? We're going to start in verse 1. After 6 days, Jesus took with him Peter, James, and John, who is the brother of James, and led them up on a high mountain by themselves. So we see Jesus' inner circle. A lot of times we see Jesus with the 12 disciples, but more often than that, we even see him more specifically with Peter, James, and John, which is kind of like he had his circle of disciples. But this is more his inner circle. I know a lot of times say like his best friends. These are people that Jesus really wanted to use in the future. And so they're up on this high mountain, and we see in verse 2, there he was transfigured before them. His face shone like the sun, and his clothes became as white as the light. So this is where Jesus showed a change. All the time on earth, he was hiding his heavenly glory. He was hiding the part of him that was God, his heavenly nature, but he showed this to the disciples on the mountain. So Peter, James, and John saw Jesus' divine glory. And this is just a picture. We really have no idea what it looks like. But we see the disciples all falling down, covering their eyes, because this would be something. His face shone like the sun, his clothes becoming white. That'd be something that would be very bright, and we know God's divine nature is something we can't see, like we can't even fathom or understand what it looks like. So the disciples are a little bit scared. And then we see, what conversation did Peter, James, and John hear at Jesus' Transfiguration? So we see that it's not just those three disciples and Jesus. There are a couple visitors in verse 3. Just then appeared before them Moses and Elijah talking with Jesus. So their visitors were people from the Old Testament. So we saw Moses and the Israelites and Elijah, one of the prophets, who were visiting with Jesus. We're then going to go on to look at Luke chapter 9, verse 31. And this is what they were discussing on top of the mountain. It says, they spoke about his departure, which he was about to bring to fulfillment at Jerusalem. So they were talking about after Jesus died, his departure from earth, both when he died, but then also after that. Then we go back to Matthew chapter 17, verse 4. It says, Peter said to Jesus, Lord, it is good for us to be here. If you wish, I will put up 3 shelters, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah. So Peter wants to be there and for Moses and Elijah to stay. Peter, James, and John heard Jesus talk about his death with Moses and Elijah. And then what message from the Father did Peter, James, and John hear? So we're going to continue on in verse 5. It says, while he was still speaking, a bright cloud covered them, and a voice from the cloud said, This is my Son, whom I love. With him I am well pleased. Listen to him. This isn't the first time we hear the Father speak about Jesus this way. Also, when John baptized Jesus, he said these exact words. This is my Son, whom I love. With him I am well pleased. Listen to him. And the Father is just reassuring that he is the Father and he's pleased with his Son, Jesus. We then see the disciples' reaction in verses 6 to 8. When the disciples heard this, they fell face down to the ground, terrified. But Jesus came and touched them. Get up, he said. Don't be afraid. When they looked up, they saw no one except Jesus. So this would be something, there was just so much going on. The disciples probably didn't know what to think. But then when they heard the Father's voice, they got scared. And they looked up, and it was just Moses and Elijah had gone back to heaven, and it was just Jesus. We then look at verse 9. As they were coming down the mountain, Jesus instructed them, "Don't tell anyone what you have seen until the Son of Man has been raised from the dead." So Jesus is telling them, you can tell people, but wait until after I've been raised from the dead. And if you're like me, sometimes when you hear really good news, you want to tell everybody. Or maybe you have a secret and maybe just want to tell one person. And Jesus is telling the disciples, hey, I know you have this feeling, but don't tell anyone what you've seen. So they heard God the Father called Jesus his Son, whom he loves. Then our truth for today is Peter, James, and John learned that Jesus was God's Son who came to die for all people. And it wasn't just people in the Old Testament. Jesus came to save all people, which includes you and me. We're then going to jump into our worksheet, and it's called Transfigure It Out. And this looks like a lot, so we're going to go through some of it together. And some of it we'll do on our Zoom call together if you are there to go through it. So the first one, it says, where Peter said it was good to be. And I'm actually going to keep up our worksheet or our Bible passage because this is going to be helpful. It says, Lord, it is good for us to be here. So I know that 2 across is the word here. All right, so I'm going to cross that one out. I know it's done. I want to tackle this really, really long one. And this is, it says, Jesus' glorious change of appearance. And I know that that is transfiguration. And as far as spelling that, I want to make sure that we get it right. So we've got transfiguration going down here. Make sure there's just one letter per box. Transfiguration. So now we have the hardest, longest one done. Can cross that one out. And we're going to continue on going through a couple of these. So then we've got the next one. We'll go the down first. What the disciples got a glimpse of. And when they got to see Moses and Elijah and Jesus in his glory, they actually got a glimpse of heaven. Cross that out. What Moses and Elijah talked to Jesus about. So that is 5 down. There's nothing in there yet. I think that it's death, but maybe let's write that here and maybe we'll just make sure that it works in there. A disciple who saw the transfiguration. So the 3 disciples that saw the transfiguration were Peter, James, and John. Again, Peter and James could fit in there, so I'm maybe going to write both of those and not quite put it in because in case it doesn't fit. What Jesus' face shone like. That is 8 down, and that is the sun. Then we go to number 9, what Jesus' clothes became as bright as. Maybe you're like me, I can't quite remember that one, but it says that Jesus' clothes became as white as the light. So I know that that is white as the light for number 9 down. That doesn't look like it's going to fit, so let's come back to that one. An Old Testament leader who spoke with Jesus. I know that it was both Moses and I'm just going to put a question mark next to number 9 because we're going to come back to that. If we don't come back to it on this video, we'll come back to it on our Zoom call. Number 11 down, though, it says an Old Testament leader who spoke with Jesus. I know that that is 11 down. I know that Moses was an Old Testament leader. But then it's also who was with him. It was Elijah, and both of those. Oh, Elijah won't fit in there. So I know that then that would be Moses. Making sure that each letter fits in. So number 11's crossed out. How the Father felt about Jesus. We hear those words a lot. With him I am well pleased. So we see that word pleased, Pleased, will fit in there. With him I am well pleased. What Jesus went up the mountain to do. That's something I don't quite remember, so we can look back. It says, after 6 days, Jesus took them up to the mountain. It doesn't say what he was going to do, but I do know that Jesus often went up mountain to pray. So I'm going to see if that one fits in 16 down. And it does. So the word pray is in there. It doesn't tell us in the Bible. But Jesus often went off on his own to go and pray. And then it says where the disciples fell in fear. That would be they fell on their knees in fear. And let's just double check that to make sure it's right. So they fell face down. So maybe let's wait to put that one down. If they fell on their face or knees, either one of those could go in. But let's make sure we've got the other ones right. We'll go to the ones that are across. It says number 3 across is a disciple who saw the transfiguration that ends in an R. And we have that same one over here. So I know it ends in an R, Peter. What the disciple felt like when they heard the Father. That's, again, one I'm not quite sure of right away, so let's wait to put that down. I know it starts with an A. If I'm just looking at the story right away, I don't see it. I know that maybe, don't be afraid. Let's see if that fits in. AFRAID. Afraid goes in there, and we know that the disciples who they were afraid. Number 6, an Old Testament leader who spoke with Jesus. I know that the first one was Moses. I know that also Elijah was with them. So putting in Elijah. What Peter wanted to put up. If you remember, he wanted to put up tents for each of the people that were there, and that's 8 across. And that one, it says that it starts with an S, so maybe let's see if we can't put up 3 shelters. And that's the word there, shelters. Continuing to go down, so we can cross that one off. Who Jesus is. That's 10 across. I know that he's God. I know that he's the Son. Maybe let's wait to put that one down. What Jesus appeared in. And that's, he appeared in glory. He always has his glory, but he usually hid that on earth. But he appeared in glory. what the Father called Jesus. So the Father said, "This is my Son, whom I love. With him I am well pleased." So going 13 across, this is my Son. And then this can help us with number 7 down. We know now that that is James, was the one disciple we want in there. And this also helps us with this one. It says what Moses and Elijah talked to Jesus about. They talked to Jesus about his death. And then let's see if we can't figure out 18 yet. Not yet. So we don't have that one just yet. But we can look at 14, what the Father told the disciples to do. So that's 14 across, and the Father told them, "This is my Son, with whom I love. With him I am well pleased. Listen to him." So listen to him. Number 17, it says, what Moses and Elijah appeared in. And so we can look at 17 across. Let's go back to our story. So it says, just then appeared before them Moses and Elijah talking with Jesus. So it doesn't say how they appeared. So I'm going to put another question mark next to that one. So far I haven't done 9 or 17, and that's fine. I'm going to take a guess on number 9, though. It says, what Jesus' clothes became as bright as. I'm thinking about something that is bright that starts with an L, and I'm thinking of lightning. And that's something that Jesus' clothes became as bright as. So that one's done. And then that will help us with number 10, who Jesus is. 3-letter word for Jesus. That's God. We're going to skip to number 19. What Jesus left the glory of heaven to become. He came down to be a man on this earth. What the disciples heard from out of the cloud. So that would be a voice from heaven. So voice from heaven, and we did that one. So voice from heaven, God. And then we'll go to 21. A disciple who saw the transfiguration. So it's Peter, James, and then John. John. All right, going on 22. What the disciples did when they heard the Father's voice. Those are the ones that are left over. We are going to go on Zoom. If you get them, great. If not, on Zoom, we are going to go through number 18 down. Number 22 across. I want you to do 21, 20, and 10 on your own. And then number 17 is, what did Moses and Elijah appear in? Now that we see more of these, we hear this a lot of times talking about Jesus, but it's in his splendor. So that should help you with that one. So you've got two that we'll do on Zoom. I want you to do those three on your own, and then you're going to be all set to go.